Now in the center of the canyon, in the ravine, this is looking uphill, up the ravine. To the right of me is Berkeley Lab's responsibility over the fence line, which you can see here if you study the video. There's a tributary ravine that comes down from Parnassus Court, and then turning downhill. Here's looking down the ravine, and you can see the massive amount of fallen eucalyptus trees and debris. And according to the map that Berkeley Labs provided, everything to the left or to the Berkeley Labs side, to the south of the ravine, is their responsibility. Everything to the right of the ravine on this side is private land and apparently some homeowner's responsibility. Same location, a little over 2 years later, looking over first to the Berkeley Lab side that has been cleaned up on both sides of the fence line. Now a grassy, sunny meadow or hill. And back over to the private side, still a mess. This hasn't been cleaned up. There has been cleanup in the upper portion, but this portion has not been cleaned up. We're still full of debris. Down the gully, you can see where Berkeley Lab cleaned up trees down in the gully below. And we now know that this is the property line right here between UC Berkeley and the private land, and no house was built. It was the shed in the prior video. And now you can see downhill the side that the volunteers, the UC Berkeley student volunteers, cleaned up with the Hillside Fire Safety Group. This is the upper portion of that area that was cleaned up, and way down below is the lower portion into areas you can't see, but you can see the green where grasses are growing. And here are a couple of deer who live here. 3 of them to be precise. This is an example of how fast things rejuvenate. This is not cleaned up. We've cut a lot off these ukes. This is all the debris still in the ground from the ukes. Here's another uke we've mostly cleaned up, but all the debris is still in the ground. And here's the edge of where we got. You've already got grasses growing on the land that we've cleared from the eucalyptus debris. This is grass down in here. It's exactly what a safe forest operation is. In the lower part of the canyon looking up, used to be completely covered with eucalyptus. Those ukes up there were completely a mess. Down to Haiyan Zhang's brother's house. We call this house Ground Zero because it will be vaporized in the firestorm. This is partly cleaned up, believe it or not, between Queens and campus. I've cut all these huge eucalyptus saplings down. You can still see one leaned up here, and a trunk here. And here's 2 big ukes with saplings on them. Another big uke. There's ukes across the fence line. The ground is covered with eucalyptus debris. Now looking south, more ukes, more hill, more debris. I'm here with a couple of neighbors from the Campus Queens neighborhood, Evald and David, working on this mess. That's David. Here we are in the grove. There's literally tons and tons and tons of branches and bark and leaves. The ground is completely covered with eucalyptus debris that all go up in flames in a snapshot. Still above campus. I've cut the base of this, all the deadwood off this. See, some of it's still hanging. This is deep in the woods here. Massive amounts of eucalyptus debris laying on the ground. This is what it looks like before it's cleared. This is all going to get cleaned up and opened, so grass will grow. There's a eucalyptus tree there that you can barely see. There it is. And there's 3 more over here, 4 more over here. There's a big old tree against the base of a big old uke, and the tree is acting as a dam. And there's probably 3 feet deep. There's a hill coming down here, but you can't tell, it's all flat. because it's all up against this tree. This entire area here is a giant pile of eucalyptus bark. And guess what? How flammable it is. Very. On the corner of Queens and Fairlawn, this is another little canyon full of eucalyptus. That's a little canyon down there, going down Queens around the turn and all the way down. 1330 Queens, looking down into the canyon to the south. You can see another huge grove in the background. I think that's the one that we documented before. This is the upper portion of the area we worked on 2 or 3 months ago. The first video was this area. This has now been pretty much cleaned up. The second video was taken in this area with the 2 neighbors working on the cleanup. You can now see that most of the debris has been removed from the ground. We've left several wood piles only because we had no time to get everything. This is the backyard of a house on Queens. Pretty much cleaned up. There's more eucalyptus leaves that have fallen since we raked this property, but now it's a gardener's job. This tree cluster has been completely cleaned up. The rest of the ukes have been stripped up at least 10 feet. You couldn't see through this area before. You can now see the houses above. And heading downhill toward Campus Drive. Again, this area was completely covered with eucalyptus saplings and underbrush. These are major saplings we cut down. You can see one of them has already started to resprout. And houses up on Queens, we raked their backyards. You couldn't see through this area at all. A prior video was astonished to see a uke within 10 feet of me taking the video that you couldn't see because of the debris, the plant material growing up. This is that tree now. It's completely exposed and it's been stripped along the ground. Moving downhill, this is 1319, I believe is the address, Campus Drive. Here's his backyard fence. Again, you couldn't see anything in here. It was all completely overgrown. We've cut back all the trees and bushes. You can see a wood pile here we've left of material we cut down. We cleaned up these oaks. We stripped these huge eucalyptus trees so that a fire on the ground won't climb the tree into the canopy. You can again see further along this range to the south where we cleaned up the hillside. Again, you could see none of this before. It was completely overgrown. It was a dense understory. And here we are on the street across from 1336 Campus Drive. These are backyards of the properties on Queens above. The eucalyptus trees have been stripped. The ground has been pretty much cleared. This is the path leading up into the area just covered. So this partial cleanup filled 3 of the city's bins, plus we left several tons of branches and tree trunks under 5 inches along the road, which had been removed by the chipper program. And then the neighbors came back in one more time and bagged the small material that was laying along the street side here, cleaned up the street. But this, estimated 4 tons per bin, we removed 15 to 16 tons of highly flammable debris from the ground. We stripped the trees. We removed the subordinate trees, bushes, and saplings that could ignite the canopy. I took Assistant Fire Chief Dan Green up to this site a couple of weeks ago, and his comment was, this is an area that I could actually suppress if a fire started in this area. That was certainly not the case before. This was a catastrophic firestorm in the canopy waiting to happen from a fire on the ground. The risk from a fire on the ground igniting the canopy in this area has now essentially been removed. I would say we've removed 60 to 75% of the debris from this part of this grove. This is one of the larger groves. It's 150 trees that extends all the way uphill and up onto Queens. This is the Campus Drive portion, although many of these properties belong to homes on Queens above. So with perhaps one or two more cleanup events with the city's bin, we could completely clear this area, finish it, and grass would begin to grow. One more video now up at 1442 campus. You couldn't see these houses before, and the ground was completely covered with a foot-thick layer of eucalyptus bark. There were saplings growing under the trees, and we've now stripped the trees as well. There's more to be done here. There's another cluster above these two houses. You can see them here, haven't been touched yet. There's more over here next to the Columbia path to the south. And there's a whole row of trees and properties up on Queens Boulevard above that need to be cleaned up and have the bark stripped. But we're probably halfway done with this grove, which is 150 trees. We call it the Campus Queens Grove. This is the Columbia path, I believe it's called, further south on Campus Drive. This property owner up here has pretty much cleaned up its lot. This was covered with eucalyptus debris, but you can see clusters of eucalyptus saplings growing on the property that haven't been removed yet. And of course there's a stand of eucalyptus trees further up on the property that haven't been treated. And this is the southern edge of what we call the Campus Queens Grove. The trees in the background are up above Queens Drive, as are these eucalyptus in this part of the picture. And looking up the path, there's really nothing on the path, but you can see the eucalyptus sapling clusters and trees on the backyard of the property above. And this is just south of the grove. No eucalyptus here, just redwoods or cedars, bay laurels, live oaks, evergreens. This is what Berkeley should look like. All we have to do is first clean up underneath and then remove the 720 eucalyptus trees on private property that sit among the residences. And then you look back into the heart of the Campus Queens Grove full of eucalyptus. So this is the transformation we're seeking. Go from this to this. It's still beautiful. There's still plenty of trees. You just don't have a catastrophic firestorm in the canopy from these species. Okay, perhaps one more further south on Campus Drive, looking back on the Campus Queen Grove. Trees up on Queens, trees below Queens. These are all eucalyptus. Trees above Campus Drive, and then in the background, the area that we worked on just uphill on Campus Drive. We count 150 trees in total. This grove sits right above another grove of over 100 trees, which sits above another grove of almost 100 trees. These groves alone could cause a catastrophic firestorm into the city that would burn the city down, or a mile wide all the way to the bay. And this can all be removed in the entire city for $3 million. How's that? Houses on Queens above campus that you could not see these buildings before we cleaned up under the eucalyptus trees in their backyard. They were invisible to the sight. It was a complete, deep understory. And I'll just say one more thing. If a group of homeowners and a few UC Berkeley students can do this in 3 or 4 weekends with crews of 6 to 8 people working 3 to 5 hours a shift, the city can get this done with professional contractors, landscape or tree contractors, or a combination, in no time. All the understory could be cleaned up within weeks if the city funded a contract with several tree and landscape contractors. And all of the trees, not just this grove, but all 720 in the residential areas of the city, plus the 60 that are still in the parks, could be removed for 3 million plus over 2 years, and the city would be transformed. Now, why isn't that an obvious strategy to basically eliminate the only truly catastrophic fire risk facing the city of Berkeley?